Episode 43. All day long the dwarves kept barging into their classes to deliver valentines, to the annoyance of the teachers. And late that afternoon, as the Gryffindors were walking upstairs for charms, one of the dwarfs caught up with Harry.
"Oi, you, Harry Potter!"
shouted a particularly grim-looking dwarf, elbowing people out of the way to get to Harry. Hot all over at the thought of being given a valentine in front of a line of first-years, which happened to include Ginny Weasley, Harry tried to escape. The dwarf, however, cut his way through the crowd by kicking people's shins and reached him before he'd gone 2 paces.
"I've got a musical message to deliver to Harry Potter in person,"
he said, twanging his harp in a threatening sort of way. "Not here," Harry hissed, trying to escape.
"Stay still,"
grunted the dwarf, grabbing hold of Harry's bag and pulling him back. "Let me go," Harry snarled, tugging. With a loud ripping noise, his bag split in 2. His books, wand, parchment, and quills spilled out onto the floor, and his ink bottle smashed over everything. Harry scrambled around, trying to pick it all up before the dwarf started singing, causing something of a hold-up in the corridor. "What's going on here?" came the cold, drawling voice of Draco Malfoy. Harry started stuffing everything feverishly into his ripped bag, desperate to get away before Malfoy could hear his musical valentine.
"What's all this commotion?"
said another familiar voice as Percy Weasley arrived. Losing his head, Harry tried to make a run for it, but the dwarf seized him around the knees and brought him crashing to the floor.
"Right,"
he said, sitting on Harry's ankles.
"Here is your singing valentine. His eyes are as green as a fresh pickled toad. His hair is as dark as a blackboard. I wish he was mine. He's really divine. The hero who conquered the Dark Lord."
Harry would have given all the gold in Gringotts to evaporate on the spot. Trying valiantly to laugh along with everyone else, he got up, his feet numb from the weight of the dwarf, as Percy Weasley did his best to disperse the crowd, some of whom were crying with mirth.
Off you go, off you go. The bell rang 5 minutes ago. Off to class now,"
he said, shooing some of the younger students away.
"And you, Malfoy."
Harry, glancing over, saw Malfoy stoop and snatch up something. Leering, he showed it to Crabbe and Goyle, and Harry realized that he'd got Riddle's diary. "Give that back," said Harry quietly.
"Wonder what Potter's written in this," said Malfoy,
who obviously hadn't noticed the year on the cover and thought he had Harry's own diary. A hush fell over the onlookers. Ginny was staring from the diary to Harry, looking terrified.
"Hand it over, Malfoy,"
said Percy sternly. "When I've had a look," said Malfoy, waving the diary tauntingly at Harry. Percy said,
"As a school prefect."
But Harry had lost his temper. He pulled out his wand and shouted, "Expelliarmus!" And just as Snape had disarmed Lockhart, so Malfoy found the diary shooting out of his hand and into the air. Ron, grinning broadly, caught it.
"Harry,"
said Percy loudly,
"no magic in the corridors. I'll have to report this, you know."
But Harry didn't care. He was one up on Malfoy, and that was worth 5 points from Gryffindor any day. Malfoy was looking furious, and as Ginny passed him to enter her classroom, he yelled spitefully after her,
"I don't think Potter liked your Valentine much."
Jenny covered her face with her hands and ran into class. Snarling, Ron pulled out his wand too, but Harry pulled him away. Ron didn't need to spend the whole of Charms belching slugs. It wasn't until they had reached Professor Flitwick's class that Harry noticed something rather odd about Riddle's diary. All his other books were drenched in scarlet ink. The diary, however, was as clean as it had been before the ink bottle had smashed all over it. He tried to point this out to Ron, but Ron was having trouble with his wand again. Large purple bubbles were blossoming out of the end, and he wasn't much interested in anything else. Harry went to bed before anyone else in his dormitory that night. Now, this was partly because he didn't think he could stand Fred and George singing,
His eyes are as green as a fresh pickled toad,
one more time, and partly because he wanted to examine Riddle's diary again, and knew that Ron thought he was wasting his time. Harry sat on his four-poster and flicked through the blank pages, not one of which had a trace of scarlet ink on it. Then he pulled a new bottle out of his bedside cabinet, dipped his quill into it, and dropped a blot onto the first page of the diary. The ink shone brightly on the paper for a second, and then, as though it was being sucked into the page, vanished. Excited, Harry loaded up his quill a second time and wrote, "My name is Harry Potter." The words shone momentarily on the page, and they too sank without trace. Then, at last, something happened. Oozing back out of the page, in his very own ink, came words Harry had never written. "Hello, Harry Potter. My name is Tom Riddle. How did you come by my diary?" These words, too, faded away, but not before Harry had started to scribble back. Someone tried to flush it down a toilet. He waited eagerly for Riddle's reply. "Lucky that I recorded my memories in some more lasting way than ink. But I always knew there would be those who would not want this diary read." "What do you mean?" Harry scrawled, blotting the page in his excitement. "I mean that this diary holds memories of terrible things. Things that were covered up. Things that happened at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry." "That's where I am now," Harry wrote quickly. "I'm at Hogwarts, and horrible stuff's been happening." "Do you know anything about the Chamber of Secrets?" His heart was hammering. Riddle's reply came quickly, his writing becoming untidier, as though he was hurrying to tell all he knew. "Of course I know about the Chamber of Secrets. In my day, they told us it was a legend, that it did not exist, but this was a lie. In my 5th year, the chamber was opened, and the monster attacked several students, finally killing one. I caught the person who opened the chamber, and he was expelled. But the headmaster, Professor Dippet, ashamed that such a thing had happened at Hogwarts, forbade me to tell the truth. A story was given out that the girl had died in a freak accident. They gave me a nice, shiny engraved trophy for my trouble and warned me to keep my mouth shut. But I knew it would happen again. The monster lived on, and the one who had the power to release it was not imprisoned." Harry nearly upset his ink bottle in his hurry to write back. "It's happening again now. There have been 3 attacks, and no one seems to know who's behind them. Who was it last time?" "I can show you if you like," came Riddle's reply. "You don't have to take my word for it. I can take you inside my memory of the night when I caught him." Harry hesitated, his quill suspended over the diary. What did Riddle mean? How could he be taken inside someone else's memory? He glanced nervously at the door of the dormitory, which was growing dark. When he looked back at the diary, he saw fresh words forming. "Let me show you." Harry paused for a fraction of a second and then wrote 2 letters. "Okay." The pages of the diary began to blow as though caught in a high wind, stopping halfway through the month of June. Mouth hanging open, Harry saw that the little square for June 13th seemed to have turned into a minuscule television screen. His hands trembling slightly, he raised the book to press his eye against the little window. And before he knew what was happening, he was tilting forward. The window was widening. He felt his body leave his bed, and he was pitched head first through the opening in the page into a whirl of color and shadow.